Should have asked you to advance a few classes for one. Gauri here, Prabhupada disciple. So we're very pleased to have your association, and perhaps tomorrow you could give Bhagavatam class. We'll let you know what the verse is. So just first of all, we'll have a little reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Shishi Karnataya Prashashiki. So this is a 6th volume of the Prabhupada Lilamrita, uniting two worlds between 75 and 76. And we're on the last or second last chapter. We're on the second last chapter, Krishna's Great Soldier. So this is just leading up to Srila Prabhupada's departure. When Harikesh had received the call to come immediately to Vrindavan, he'd been told to expect the worst. Immediately he contacted his printer, who was in the process of completing several books, and told him that he must have advance copies by the next day. So by the time he got on the plane for India, he had newly printed volumes of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in German, Krishna trilogy in German, and the Yugoslavian Sri Upanishad. It is Yugoslavian, but I don't know what language that would have been in. This was in 77, of course. But when he arrived at Srila Prabhupada's door in Vrindavan, a devotee told him he could not bring the books to Srila Prabhupada now. Why not? Harikesh said. This is not the kind of mood we are trying to create here, the devotee explained. What? Are you crazy? Exclaimed Harikesh. Books of Prabhupada's life and soul. He went in and showed Prabhupada the 7 new books. Immediately Prabhupada took the first volume of the Krishna trilogy and held it up. Looking at the cover painting of Radha and Krishna, Prabhupada began crying and reached out, trying to stroke Harikesh's head. Harikesh reached out and held Srila Prabhupada's hand, thinking himself unworthy of being patted. He was rotting here, typewriting, said Prabhupada, referring to when Harikesh had been his secretary. Just before going to preach in Europe, I said, you go. I had 10 servants. You thought I was degrading you by sending you away. No, now you understand. Yes, I understand, said Harikesh, sobbing. Here is an intelligent boy, I thought, said Prabhupada. Why should he rot here typewriting? Of course, typewriting for Srila Prabhupada was so important, but he's seen something more important that he could do. Prabhupada looked at each book. Printing and everything is first class, he said. He asked how many had been printed, and Harikesh replied, 120,000 Krishna trilogies, 60,000 Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, and 10,000 Upanishads. Can you distribute that Upanishad? Prabhupada asked. Harikesh assured him that they could definitely distribute the book in Yugoslavia. Then print more, said Prabhupada. They continued discussing book production. Interesting, then print more. First of all, he's asking him, can you do this? Yes. And he didn't say, okay, fine. He says, okay, then print more. He didn't just leave everything closed. That's the end of it. Keep it going. Books were indeed Prabhupada's life and soul. From Harikesh's entering with the new books, Prabhupada had felt a profound ecstasy that had spread to Harikesh and all the devotees present. Everyone was keenly aware that what they were experiencing was transcendental, a special reciprocation with Srila Prabhupada, and as long as they were sincere, it would not die. Now you just have to become better, said Harikesh, more healthy. Healthy, said Srila Prabhupada. I have nothing to do with this body. Srila Prabhupada ki. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Sri Caitanya Charitamrta, Madhya Chapter 18, entitled The Lord's Visit to Vrindavan, starting from text 111, is that right? 114. Okay. Ladinya Samvid Ashlishta Ladinya Samvid Ashlishta Satchidananda Ishvara Satchidananda Ishvara Swavidya Samvrito Jiva Swavidya Samvrito Jiva Sanklesha Nirakara Nikarakara Sanklesha Nikarakara Ladinya Samvidashlista Sachid Ananda Ishvara Swavidya Samvrito Jiva Sanklesha Nikarakara Ladinya Samvidashlista Sachid Ananda Ishvara Swavidya Samvrito Jiva Sanklesha Nikarakara. Please chant.
Ladinya Samvedashishta Sachidananda Ishvara Svavidya Samvrito Jiva Sanklesha Nikarakara Ladinya Samvedashishta Sachit Ananda Ishvara Svavidya Samrito Jiva Sanklesha Nikarakara Ladinya Samvedashishta Sachidananda Ishvara Svavidya Samrito Jiva Sanklesha Nikarakara
Mataji.
Ladinya Samvedashishta Sachidananda Ishvara Swavidya Samrito Jiva Sanklesha Nikarakara
Ladinya by the Ladini potency. Samvit by the Samvit potency. Ashlishta surrounded. Sat Chit Ananda always transcendently blissful. Ishvara the Supreme Controller. Swa own. Avidya by ignorance. Samvrita surrounded. Jiva the living entity. Sanklesha of the threefold miseries. Nikara of the multitude. Akara the mind. Translation. The Supreme Personality of the Godhead, the Supreme Controller, is always full of transcendental bliss and is accompanied by the potencies known as Ladini and Samvit. The conditioned soul, however, is always covered by ignorance and embarrassed by the threefold miseries of life. Thus, he is a treasure house of all kinds of tribulations. Please repeat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller, is always full of bliss, is always full of transcendental bliss,
is always full of transcendental bliss,
and is accompanied by the potencies
is accompanied by the potencies
known as Ladini
known as Himani
and Samvit.
and Samvit.
The conditioned soul,
The conditioned soul,
however,
however,
is always covered by
is
ignorance
always covered with ignorance
and embarrassed by the threefold miseries of life.
and embarrassed by the full miseries of life.
Thus he is a treasure house
The treasure house
of all kinds of tribulations.
of all kinds of traditions.
Srila Prabhupada's purport. This quotation of Vishnu Swami is cited in Sridhar Swami's Bhavarta Dipika commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam 176. So it's a very short purport. And we'll continue on to the next verse and a few after that. And just before we go on to that, it's interesting to see here that you wouldn't necessarily consider being steeped in ignorance, embarrassed by the threefold miseries as being a treasure house. So we can see a bit of sarcasm perhaps here. The living entity, the conditioned living entity is a treasure house of all kinds of tribulations. There's no shortage. It's endless. Just like Aladdin's cave, if you were to enter into such a thing, you'd think, well, this is enough riches to last a lifetime. So we have enough miseries to last a lifetime. Then the modes are always fighting for supremacy over the living entity. And even the living entities, when they're influenced by the mode of goodness, they think they're doing okay, but it's still, as Prabhupada, I was just listening to Prabhupada, and he was saying, we want to make the prison house nice. I've got a better cell than you. It's still a cell, prison cell. So the three modes of material nature are just different categories of how nice a prison cell you have. But still, for the devotee, they want to be engaged in activities and they want to raise a consciousness beyond anything to do with this material world. And as we are marginal potency, then when we are conditioned and attached, connected with three modes of material nature, then we certainly have quite a stock of these tribulations, miseries coming from natural phenomena, our own body and mind, and other living entities, the threefold kleshas. But the Supreme Lord is always blissful. Even one time, one devotee had to paint a picture of Krishna who was suffering a headache, and they had Krishna looking morose. Prabhupada says, no, Krishna's never looking morose like that. So Krishna's always blissful. It's not that he's under some influence. If it was, he wouldn't be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Something would be out of his control. And so as living entities, marginal living entities, we can either be influenced by and absorbed in the modes of material nature or Krishna. If we connect with Krishna, then we connect with that eternal we connect with the aspect of the Lord's eternality, knowledge and bliss, and then that revives our original relationship as well. So we'll go on to the next verse. I'll just read through this and the next. A foolish person who says that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the same as a living entity is an atheist, and he becomes subject to punishment by the Superintendent of Death at Yamaraj. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that the word pasandi refers to one who considers the living entity under the control of the lucid energy to be equal with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to all material qualities. Another kind of pasandi is one who does not believe in the spirit soul. So what's a pasandi? Anybody? Fender. The superior potency of the Lord. Another kind of pasandi is one who does not believe in the spirit soul, superior potency of the Lord, and therefore does not distinguish between spirit and matter. While describing one of the offences against chanting the holy names, specifically the offence called Shruti Shastra Nindana, blaspheming the Vedic literature, Jiva Goswami states in his Bhakti Sandarbha, Yata Pashande Margena, Dattatreya Shaba Devopa Sakanam Pasandinam. Worshippers of impersonalists like Dattatreya are also Pasandis, concerning the offence of Ham Mama Buddhi or Dihatma Buddhi, concerning the body to be the self. Jiva Goswami states, Deva Dravinadi Nimitka Pasanda Shabdena Chadasha Parada Eva Lakshante Pashanda Mayadvat Tesham. Those who are overly absorbed in the conception of the body and the bodily necessities are also called Pashandis. Elsewhere in the Bhakti Sandarbha it is stated, Hudishya Devata Eva Juhoti Cha Dadati Cha Sa Pashanditi Vigyeya Swatantro Vapi Karmasu. A Pashandi is one who considers the demigods and the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be one. Therefore, a Pashandi worships any kind of demigod as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who disobeys the orders of the spiritual master is also considered a Pashandi. The word Pashandi has been described in many places in Srimad Bhagavatam, including 4.2, 28, 30 and 32, 5.6.9 and 12, 2.13 and 3.43. So if you want to find out more about what a Pashandi is, some homework for you. On the whole, a Pashandi is a non-devotee who does not accept the Vedic conclusions. In the Hari Bhakti Vilas 1.1.17, there's a verse quoted from the Padma Prana describing the Pashandi. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu quotes this verse as the following text. So we'll come to those in a minute or two. Makam Karoti Vachalam Bhagam Lagai Tigrim Yaki Patamam Vande Shirim Vinikarnam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. A foolish person who says that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the same as the living entity is an atheist, and he becomes subject to punishment by the superintendent of death, Yamaraj. So the favourite word of this purport is Pashandi. Now we might think, I feel a bit hopeless after hearing that because I'm such a Pashandi. Anybody feel like a Pashandi at times? But the next verses give some hope, so don't worry, it's not all over. So typically in Kali Yuga, then even those who have some connection with the Vedas, Prabhupada says, due to a poor fund of knowledge, and you think, well, how can they be worshipping demigods, or how could they be impersonalists when they're reading the Vedas, or they're brought up in that kind of background? And even, other schools of thought, religion, etc., then they don't accept Krishna's Supreme Personality of Godhead, then they're considered non-devotees. And because they cannot come to the conclusion themselves, unless one accepts the personality of Godhead, then they're accepting something less than the cause of all causes. In Brahma Samhita, Lord Brahma says, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda, Sarva Karana Karanam. So of all the Ishwaras, there's many different Ishwaras. We're also Ishwaras. We have a little controlling potency, but not very much. We can sometimes control how much prasad we put on our plate. Depends how hungry or whatever. Sometimes not. And sometimes we don't even have control about if we can stand on our two legs. If there's a bit of black ice, we walk out there and then we slip. We weren't in control. We like to think we're in control, but there's so much happens out with our control. And there's so much potential for anything happening at any time. Padam padam yad vipadam natesham. Step after step, there's danger in this material world. So devotees realize that, but they don't go around terrified all the time because we take shelter in Krishna. and we put everything in Krishna's hands. And in this way, then we know Mari Krishna Rakike, Raki Krishna Marike, that if Krishna wants to protect me, no one can harm me. And if Krishna wants to kill me, no one can protect me. It's just like some time ago, some of us may have experienced, we're talking with Jai Srila Prabhu recently, he experienced this also, that sometimes someone may threaten you or even threaten your life, and then your mind might go back to perhaps how you would have dealt with that in the past and think of maybe some defense mechanism, or you may become afraid or whatever. But then we just take shelter in Krishna, and we remember Krishna is the supreme controller, so if Krishna doesn't want something to happen, it doesn't matter what someone else thinks is going to happen, it's not going to happen. And if Krishna wants it to happen, then that's what he wants. If we're surrendering to Krishna, then he's in control. We put trust that he knows what he's doing, because we certainly don't. Was it to say, you have to make plans, but plans are useless. So we try to make a plan. It's not that we just become, they say that when you join Hare Krishna movement, we can renounce everything, renounce our connection to material world, etc. But we don't renounce our intelligence. We still try to use that in Krishna's service. It's not that we become thoughtless, become thoughtful, but for Krishna, we use everything in Krishna's service. So we might think, oh, well, I struggle sometimes with being in the bodily concept of life, that makes me a non-devotee, or any other of these offences. We may be materially motivated, etc. But still, we don't lose hope, because the next verses are also going to bring some hope. So we'll just read through the next verses. Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahma Rudra Rudradi Daivatai Samadvenaiva Viksheta Sapashandi Bhaved Dhruvam. A person who considers demigods like Brahma and Shiva to be on an equal level with Narayan is to be considered an offender or Prashandi. So there's a few more offenders here being mentioned. So in the morning program, just like this morning, we before Japa, we were reciting the 10 offences, and this is to remind us that we'll have to look out for these. To begin with, we didn't even know they existed. We heard about chanting Hare Krishna, and maybe we joined a Kirtan. We thought, oh, this is great fun. It beats going down to the football ground and chanting the name of the local football team, or going to the rave or whatever. So we get a higher taste simply by the experience of taking part in Krishna consciousness through chanting, taking prasadam. Prabhupada said this Hare Krishna movement is simply chanting, dancing and feasting. That's what's going on in the spiritual world, and this Prabhupada's brought the spiritual world here to the material world. And everything else is simply just to support the devotees to be able to continue doing that, and to support the propagation of this chanting, dancing and feasting. All the books which are there are to encourage more people to take up this chanting, dancing and feasting. We go out in Harinam, we're demonstrating, we're showing this is life was like, what is like for a devotee. And sometimes people will say, oh, why don't you guys go and get a job? And we say, well, why don't you come and join us? So they've got usually they say that because they're not so happy. They're thinking, oh, you guys are just having fun and I'm having to work. And Prabhupada's mood was just, well, come and join us then. Krishna's providing everything. He's been fulfilling the desires of everyone since time immemorial. Surely he can satisfy one more insignificant living entity. So this pure fund of knowledge we're talking about is that people sometimes have access to knowledge, but if it's not given through parampara, if it's not spoken by a bona fide representative, then there may be some obstruction there. It's just like our friend Karina, she invites us to do Bhagavad Gita introduction, usually at the end of her teacher training for her yoga students, because she teaches not just yoga, but she teaches Sanskrit and Kirtan, and she tries to give them the whole experience, not just the exercise. Her mood is that if you simply want the gymnastics, then find another teacher. And some of them had been reading some version of Bhagavad Gita, and they were preparing some questions. And first of all, I was thinking, how am I going to answer this? Because if I try to answer from the Gita they've been reading, then it's just, we're not going to get them the proper answer. So first of all, it says, well, you've been reading this Gita, but I'm following this tradition, Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is our authorized version of Bhagavad Gita, so I can only answer from this. So when took their questions from their translation of the Gita, and we answered from Prabhupada's Gita, then everything became very clear. All the confusion and anxiety they were feeling of how is this going to be practical. And then when we apply the principles of Bhagavad Gita as they are given in Bhagavad Gita, not as somebody thinks it should be, Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is, not Bhagavad Gita as I think it should be, or as I twist it to suit my own philosophy. Prabhupada said, if you don't like the teaching of Bhagavad Gita, then write your own book. Don't try to jump on the bandwagon of Krishna's fame by writing Bhagavad Gita as it never should have been. So we see this gives us great confidence, because if you hear Prabhupada speaking in his lectures, especially his room conversations, morning walks, when he's the living Bhagavatam, as Hari Sari Prabhu says, you will have the book Bhagavatam and we have the person Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada is living Bhagavatam. And when Prabhupada is speaking, he's actually speaking what he lives, what is fully realized, and he's never defeated. Just because he's fully surrendered to Krishna, and Krishna is Ajita, unconquerable, then the pure devotee is never conquered also. So it gives us great confidence when we hear Prabhupada defeating the various arguments. Sometimes you hear a devotee playing the devil's advocate, and you think, I don't know how I'd answer that question. And Prabhupada just immediately, no hesitation, because he doesn't have to try to work something out. He's situated in pure transcendental knowledge. He doesn't have to think, I better go and think about that one. Not in a mental platform, not like us, personally speaking. But then the more we hear from the authorized source, the more we become bona fide representatives also. And Prabhupada wanted this in Lord Caitanya. We'll see in a minute. He wanted everyone to become a spiritual master and deliver everyone in the land. Not that we have to become Diksha Guru and have thousands of disciples. Maybe that will happen for some. But the main thing is to take this Hare Krishna mantra and convince people to take to this chanting and to read these books so they can understand this Bhakti Yoga process. So Prabhupada has explained this poor fund of knowledge means that they may have some knowledge, but it's a poor fund, it's incomplete, and it's misinterpreted. But when we hear it properly, then we can become properly situated. Text 117, Lokakahi tomate kabu nahi jiva mati krishnara sadrisha tomara akriti prakriti. After Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained the difference between an ordinary living being and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the people said, no one considers you an ordinary human being. You are like Krishna in every respect, in both bodily features and characteristics. Akritye tomare dekhi vrajendra nandanan dehakanti pitambara kaila achadana. By your bodily features we can see that you are none other than the son of Nanda Maharaj, although the golden lustre of your body has covered your original complexion. Mrigamada Vashri Bandi Tabu Na Lukaya Ishvara Svabhava Tomara Taka Nahiyaya. As the aroma of deer musk cannot be concealed by wrapping it in a cloth, your characteristics as the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be concealed by any means. Halaukika prakriti tomara buddhi agochara tomadeki Krishna premi jagat pagala. Indeed, your characteristics are uncommon and beyond the imagination of an ordinary living being. Simply by seeing you, the entire universe becomes mad with ecstatic love for Krishna. Sribala Vridda Ara Chandala Yavana Yetumara Ekabara Paya Darashana Krishna Namalaya Nachi Hana Unmata Acharya Haila Se Tarila Jagata. If they see you just once, even women, children, old men, meat-eaters, and members of the lowest caste immediately chant the holy name of Krishna, dance like madmen, and become spiritual masters capable of delivering the whole world. So there's the great hope. You've just seen Lord Caitanya. So now you're capable of delivering the whole world because you're his representative, and he is Mahavijaya, the avatar, the most merciful incarnation, Patita Pavana, Dora Hari, the savior of the most fallen. Sometimes we think, personally speaking, sometimes we might get a bit full of ourselves and think that we're better than this or better than that. But actually, we can consider ourselves, we must be less than everyone, because if Lord Chaitanya's mood was to save the most fallen first, and we're amongst the first, then what does that say about us? He's demonstrating his mercy by saving us first. We're the examples of his mercy. Darshanera karya achuka ye tomara nama shune say Krishna prema mata tare tribhuvane. Apart from seeing you, whoever listens to your holy name is made mad with ecstatic love for Krishna and is able to deliver the three worlds. So this is also Prabhupada, he quoted many verses to support the fact that just because someone is born in a Western family, as a Yavana, Malecha, Chandala, generally considered in the Varnashram system as outcasts, etc., then if they know the science of Krishna consciousness, then they're qualified to deliver all the living entities. And simply, so if we align ourselves with the Guru Parampara, then simply by hearing what that message is, taking it to our heart and giving it to others, this is aligning ourselves with the Parampara. Prabhupada says that the disciple can never repay the debt to the spiritual master. If someone takes you out of the material world and gets you back into the eternal spiritual world, then how can you repay that debt? What are you going to give them? You can't give them anything from the material world because they're not interested, and they're already situated in that eternal world. But he says, if you want to try to repay that debt, then the only thing you can try to do is to, whatever you've learned in Krishna consciousness, give it to others. We don't have to wait until we've got every certificate that ISKCON higher education has to offer before we can step out there and give it. Otherwise, we may pass away before that happens, or else realize that. So Vijnana is, of course, we can do these things as Prabhupada wanted us to read the book, study them, understand them better. Not that we just read it once, 10 years ago, and that's it. I know what it's about. Don't need to read it now. I've read the Bhagavad Gita once. We have to read it every day. We've been reading it. Some devotees have been reading it for 30, 40, 50 years. And the more you read it, the more you see that you haven't understood it yet. You understand more and more. First time I read it was in 1982 or maybe 3. And I don't feel that it's any less... I don't feel any less curious. Certainly by chanting and by engaging in devotional service, the Lord reciprocates by giving you deeper understanding. So just as Krishna's fathomless, then the knowledge that Krishna speaks, Krishna's words, is also fathomless, but that doesn't mean to say we cannot understand. It means we simultaneously understand, and we understand more, and we understand more. And then that, just like the relationship with Krishna is not static, the living entity's relationship with the Supreme Lord is ecstatic, which means it never comes to the point where it's just static. Okay, I know Krishna, that's it. What next? Is that it? It's a bit boring for eternity now. Krishna's Navayovana, ever youthful, effervescent. It's not that we become tired of seeing Krishna or hearing Krishna. If we're hearing something which we've heard before and we think, oh, not that again, then we have to adjust our consciousness. We should be saying to the mind, oh no, not that again. We shouldn't be thinking, oh, I've heard that before, I need something new. It's actually, if we're in the right mood for hearing, then hearing the same thing becomes deeper and deeper, and it gathers more and more meaning. So any type of hearing of this transcendental sound vibration is Cheto Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. It's cleansing the mirror of the mind. So if we come to the point where we think, oh, I don't want to hear this, I've heard this so many times before, then we have to realize that we've become a bit inattentive in the Cheto Darpana Marjanam process. And repetition is the mother of learning, but not just learning intellectually, how to juggle a few words around. The impersonalists are good at that. They're very expert at juggling words, and they can become difficult to defeat. So we simply don't want to become like devotional word jugglers. We want that knowledge to be vijnana, to be realized knowledge, to go deep into the heart. So simultaneously engaging devotional service and keeping in touch with instructions from Lord Caitanya, from Krishna Bhagavad Gita, from Srila Prabhupada, from the Guru Parampara. So even though previously it was mentioned here that certain categories were pashandis or offenders, then here it's saying if one sees the Lord and hears the Lord's holy name, then we become so advanced simply by that association. We become free from all our sins and offences, and we become qualified to be spiritual masters capable of delivering the whole world. Yeah, and then it's been mentioned here that apart from seeing you, whoever listens to your holy name is made mad with ecstatic love for Krishna and is able to deliver the three worlds. Just like here in Krinbam today, we have the honour of having one Prabhupada disciple. Now, we didn't have the opportunity to personally meet or see Srila Prabhupada, but at the same time, we don't feel as if we don't have that connection because we're hearing. We're hearing coming from that transcendental personality. And especially if we hear from those who actually were there personally with them, they're eyewitnesses. Yeah, this pure devotee was here. It's just like someone can say, oh, Krishna's just a made-up fictional thing, And then in years to come, someone may say, oh, there was no such person as Prabhupada. But the devotees are smart enough, they recorded almost every word they said. They got them on camera, they got them on tape, etc. So for us, it's just like Prabhupada was just in the room and he just left, and we were just talking to the people who just seen him before he left the room. So we're so very fortunate that we've got the association. Perhaps we didn't get Prabhupada's direct personal association, but those who actually were with him. So this is a very blessed time to be a devotee. Tomara nama shuni haya swapacha pavana alokika shakti tomar na yaya katana. Simply by hearing your holy name, dog-eaters become holy saints. Your uncommon potencies cannot be described in words. So for those who may be still lost by poor fund of knowledge, they may not accept the devotees of the Krishna conscious movement, but the time is coming more and more where people are accepting that. As the devotees also follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas, then they become also great saintly persons here. And regardless of what they did, like there's this saying that every saint had a past and every sinner has a future. So by the association of the Lord through hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, etc., then one becomes pure. And then one becomes beyond any kind of mundane identification. One identifies as eternal servant of the servants of the Lord. And this is an important thing. Just like before starting puja, we chant this verse, Naham vipro nachaya narapti napivaisha nasuda naham varni nachaya karabhir na vanastu yutirva kintu proja nikalara paramananda purnamritabdir gopi bhatu padakamayor dasa das and das. That I am not a Brahmin, Vaishya, Shudra, Kshatriya, Brahmachari, Grihastha Vanapashta Sannyas, but a maternal servant of the Lord of the Milkmaids of Vraja. So this is our mood, that whatever we're asked to do in the service of the Lord, we're prepared to do it. We don't just limit ourselves to, I can only do Brahminical duties, or I'm just a fallen Sudra, or whatever. No, we do anything. We should not remain. A Vaishnava is beyond these categories. That means he can do any of these. He's not attached to being or not being any one of these. And just like in Krishna's pastimes, sometimes the living entity, the eternal servant of the Lord, will appear as a male or appear as female. Even sometimes the same person will do like that. In Lord Krishna's pastimes, they were one. And then when Lord Caitanya comes, who's Krishna, then he brings his associates. So the fully surrendered devotee, whatever is pleasing to the Lord, then they go along with that. And therefore they get the protection of the Lord. And regardless of what birth we may have had or what activities we may have done, then that's all in the past. Lord Caitanya only sees the good in living entity. And he's came to Golokera, Premadana, Harinama, Sankirtana. He's came to bring this gift of pure transcendental love from Goloka Dham, to bring the spiritual world into the material world, to give us a little experience of this is what it's going to be like if you join the big party in the spiritual sky. It's like this forever. You don't have to go to work any longer. You don't have to work in these horrible factories, etc. Of course, if someone is in a situation where they have some family responsibilities, then they shouldn't just drop everything and create some havoc for the rest of the family. They have to take care of the responsibilities and still be a devotee in whatever situation you're in. Lord Chaitanya's associates also showed that they weren't all living in an ashram. Some of them were devotees living in their circumstances with their family, but they were devotees, 100% devotees. So this Hare Krishna movement basically means that it's we're hearing this Maha Mantra, we're experiencing something from it which is nice, and we want to share it with others. Just like in the material world, people, when they find something nice, they want to share it with someone. Like they get a new car and they want to take their friends on a run, check this out. And if they think their friend's a good driver, they might give them a shot of it. Or they find some new drug or new alcohol or new clothes or new sound. They want to share it. Check this out, this is great. So similarly, the devotees are the friends of everyone, because we see everyone as being part and parcel of Krishna, and that they are suffering. They own this treasure house of tribulations, and we want to show them that there is another life, there is another way. And you've tried everything, just try this. There's nothing to lose. If you're a bit embarrassed, just chant in your house when no one's around, or come and join us. Won't tell anyone. So we'll just stop there. If anyone's got any questions or comments, please.
If you don't mind.
Of course.
Just because you spoke about Srila Prabhupada, we never had it. Me personally, the second generation, but personally Srila Prabhupada, but we all Srila Prabhupada. Just remember how Srila Prabhupada wrote in the first canto, in Srimad Bhagavatam. Here is the Narada Muni appearing in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Narada Muni, just by the words, by reading the word, the printed words, we could actually associate Srila Prabhupada. Sorry, to Narada Muni. So I think in the same way, we're not only reading Prabhupada the pages of Bhagavad Gita on purpose, and the Srimad Bhagavatam, but the whole movement is actually, in a sense, not different from Srila Prabhupada. The process. So when we participate in this process, this is like automatically we are naturally associating with Srila Prabhupada. Firstly.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Prabhupada says, if you want to find me, you'll find me in my books. So that's substantially what we're saying is that we don't feel that we don't know Prabhupada because we're reading about him. When you read Prabhupada's books, you're getting Prabhupada's association. And when you're distributing books to people, you're giving them Prabhupada's association. You're arranging, they take the book home, you're arranging a program for Prabhupada to speak in their house. So when they, and similarly, we don't feel like we don't know Narada Muni or Bhaktivinoda Thakur. When we read Bhaktivinoda Thakur's writings, then we really connect with that. And that's just, it's not like a mental thing, it's much deeper than that. Because he's taking us further and further into Krishna consciousness. Yeah, and so this is, he reasons ill who says that Vaishnavas die. And what's the rest of it? Does anyone remember?
Well, still with sound. The Vaishnava listen, we can try to spread it on.
That's right. And just like we were just reading there, as Prabhupada was about to leave his body from the Lilamrita, we were just reading that Prabhupada was saying that I have nothing to do with this body. So of course the physical association we may have missed, but we haven't missed anything that anyone else couldn't get in the sense of the instructions and hearing the transcendental sound vibration. And we have books, videos, tapes. There's so much association can be there. Once I asked Keshava Bharati Maharaj, how do you know who's your spiritual master? Because there's so many wonderful devotees, you can get a bit confused. You know, it's like you spend your life trying to choose which one is it. And he said, whoever inspires you most to follow Prabhupada. And I thought, well, that was a great answer. There was another one, Shiv Ramaraj, who said, you'll know who's your spiritual master when you stop asking that question. And of course, this is the fact that anyone who is repeating what Prabhupada said, then they're worthy of listening to. And Prabhupada says his only qualification is he never changed anything. Now, that's no small thing. You know, if we play a game of Chinese whispers, by the time it gets round everybody, it comes back to somebody. The first person is something quite different. Just like recently we heard somebody said something about somebody, and you have to try to figure out who said what did it start off with. Within ISKCON we have an added austerity as an international organisation, is that there is a language barrier. I thought you meant that. In my country it means the opposite. And by the time it gets translated to a few different people, it comes as something different. And then some poor little devotees, you know, being hung, drawn and quartered because of something they never said in the first place. So this never changing anything, don't add anything, don't take anything away, just give it as it is. Even as Prabhupada's book says, Bhagavad Gita as it is. And of course, Prabhupada also encourages us to preach in our own words. It's not that we become verbatim robots. But even Prabhupada did say, preach verbatim. One time I was doing Sankirtan in Edinburgh. It was quite, when we just came back up to Scotland in 1986, I think it was. Yeah, beginning 86. And it was, I was finding it quite difficult on the street distributing books, and people were kind of getting one over me. I wasn't getting the books out. So I was kind of in anxiety about it. And I was praying to it. Then I read in Bhagavatam that morning, or the next morning, that Prabhupada said, just repeat verbatim. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to make a few notes of verbatim things which relate to the doubts that people were firing at me. And I thought, well, it might not be exactly, you know, an answer to what their question was, but I thought I'll just repeat it. And so I did, and then say, oh, okay, right, I'll have the book. So it gave me great faith. You know, if you just follow what the spiritual master says, you might not understand it, but do it, and then you'll understand it. If we have to understand it first, we might never do it, then you'll never understand it. So we have to have a little faith, just like Prabhupada says, to go from one place to another on the airplane, you have to have a little faith to take that step onto the plane. So that's, if you have a little faith and the words of the Acharya, who is uplifting us out of the deep dark well of material existence, knowing that if we just give this to others, it worked for me, it'll work for them too. Why should we think, oh, the age is too fallen? You know, that's like saying, well, Lord Caitanya, your mission's finished. You wasted your time coming. You know, it's the same Maya. If the teachings of Bhagavad Gita are timeless, then why should they not exist now as they did 50 years ago or 40 years ago when many people were becoming devotees? It's just a matter of how to present it. And if we're not sure how to present it, just present it as it is. Just try to make it relevant, that's the main thing. Ashish, bro.
Thank you, bro. One small question, bro. So, speaking of this personalities or offenders, which is a higher offense, like offense towards the holy name, offense towards the deities, and offense towards scriptures, and offense towards devotees?
Yeah, if you want to, the purpose of learning what the offences are so we can avoid them. Now we can learn the details of these things from the Nectar of Devotion, lists many different offences. But the main thing is if we imbibe the spirit of devotion and service, then we won't be discouraged by hearing of all the offences that we're guilty of. We'll be quite glad, oh, I don't want to do the wrong thing. It's like you're not supposed to yawn in front of the deities and stretch and point your feet to the deities, things like that. And if our mood is, we want to serve the deities, we want to serve the spiritual master, we don't want to do anything. Just like example, if you were going to meet the Queen, then somebody would give you a little training. Okay, you don't say this unless she speaks to you. You don't speak to her, and you address her as this way, and you don't do this, you don't do this, and you can do this, and you can't do that. So you maybe learn like that. What to speak of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is. The Queen has some fame for the last 60 odd years or something, but Krishna's fame is eternal. Krishna is the most important person, the most powerful person. But he's also very kind. He doesn't like to see offences. So we can learn from, we have the 10 offences. They're mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, and is it 64 offences against the deities? Is that right? Yeah. I can't remember if it's 64, I think it is. So we can learn these things and avoid these things. And these things are there to help to make things conducive for our advancement in Krishna consciousness, so our chanting can become clearer, can become more pure. But we shouldn't think, I'm so offensive, I should just give up. It's just like one boy, he was chanting 16 rounds, and then we went to the program. It was in Dundee, and he said, how's your chanting doing? Oh, I stopped chanting. Why is that? Because my chanting's offensive. So I thought, if I don't chant, I won't commit any offences. Now that's, once again, that's like saying, Lord Caitanya, what are you doing giving no one the holy name? They're just going to commit offences. Therefore, Prabhupada says, we chant Jai Shri Krishna Caitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. We get the mercy of Lord Caitanya, so we become free from offences. This is why we started this Gauranga campaign many years ago in Scotland. We wanted people to get purified by chanting Lord Chaitanya's name. And then when they finally chant Hare Krishna, they'd be free from offence. There's no offence in calling out Lord Chaitanya's name. He doesn't take any offence. This is the great mercy. So even though we might think, well, I'm so offensive, but I'm not going to give up. This is my only, even though I'm unqualified, then there's no other course of action I can take in life. There's nothing else better to do. Sometimes people say, oh, did you not have anything better to do? Is that why you joined? So, I couldn't find anything better to do. This is the best thing to do. I tried this and I tried that, but this is better. Our own personal example is the best way to preach Krishna consciousness. It's like, because people will relate to what we gave up. And unless we're mad, but we are madmen, because Lord Chaitanya is saying here that, it's mentioned by, who is speaking here again? Yeah, it's Lord Chaitanya. Well, it was Lord Caitanya talking to the people, so this is Vrindavan. There doesn't seem to be a specific person. So, simply by hearing the holy name, and we see that in Harinam, some people, they're completely engrossed in the material life, and they hear the holy name, and momentarily their spiritual consciousness is reawakened, and they want to be part of that. Did anybody have that experience that they've seen a Harinam and they think, I'd like to be part of that? I experienced that in Glasgow many years ago. I was taking my young brother to a concert, standing in the queue outside, and the Hari Nam came down. I thought, I hope they come over. Hope they've got some books on them, because I seen that they were giving out books. And it was just really, you felt like some kind of awakening. And sometimes you see that, the living entities that get polarized, sometimes they go, they want to like throw something at you, they scowl at you. But then if they get too problematic, you just go, Namaste, Nana Singh, ya. Lord Singh comes and protects the Sanktan movement. He's very fond of protecting the Sanktan devotees. So we need not have any fear when we're out there preaching. And simply preaching doesn't mean to say that we think we're better than you and talk down to people. It just means that we're sharing. Prachar means that we've got so much Krishna consciousness, we want to give it to others. So therefore it's important that we keep ourselves immunized against Maya by always trying to endeavour to be Krishna conscious. So that even in our sleep we're dreaming of Krishna, we're dreaming of service, we're dreaming of devotees. Okay, anything else? Okay, we better stop there, it's prasad time. Iskon Guruvinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Sri Caitanya Caritamrta ki, Sri Caitanya Prasad ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.